afternoon. I think it's just Faskamar. It's just crossed the threshold, and it's a real privilege to be here with these amazing speakers, and I can't wait for the conversation. And for those of you joining online in person, what a privilege to be talking about culture and well-being. My name is Lewis Hou. I use he, him pronouns, and as a visual descriptor, I am probably holding back some more darker, coffee-stained, caffeine-excited faces. I have East Asian heritage, dark black hair, and glasses as black as my hair as well. And this is a topic incredibly close to my heart, culture and well-being. I'm part of the Science Ceilidh, so I started with a tune called Lerwick Lounge. I felt that was appropriate, given the people here. And we support creativity, culture, equity and well-being across Scotland, including through things like the Ideas Fund, Fun Palaces, and through the Culture and Wellbeing Community Network Scotland. And we're great friends of the Culture Collective and the work that they do. Enough about me, though. We have some amazing speakers doing some great work all across the north of Scotland, and I would not be able to do them justice as an introduction. So my first question to get people started is to go through each of our speakers in turn and to ask them to introduce themselves and to give us a wee flavour briefly about what culture, well-being and health actually mean to you. And we're going to start off with Jo.
Thank you. My name's Jo Hastie, and I am the Artroom manager with Grampian Hospital's Art Trust. And I manage a project called Artroom, which is kind of person-centred project that uses artists to work in wards. God, that's a big question. But I think they're all kind of linked, and we've always kind of seen these things as separate. And I think one of the things that I learned from lockdown is, your health and well-being and culture, they're all kind of intrinsic, kind of one of the things that I used before, COVID was going to see live bands and live music. And then obviously in lockdown, you couldn't do that. And I just felt like there was something massive missing from my life. And so you're kind of automatically looking for something else cultural to feed your spirit. So I think, all three are kind of vital to who you are as a person, but also to how you feel about yourself and your happiness and all of that is interlinked.
I'm sure it's no accident that the name of this event is NOURISH.
Yeah.
Sally.
My name's Sally Thomson. I am the director of Grampian Hospital's Art Trust. Grampian Hospital's Art Trust has been working across the region for the last 30-odd years. I mean, it's been a long time. I mean, the region, the NHS of the time was fairly visionary in thinking, in actual fact, art could make a difference. And it started off with just pictures. And then they added, what happens if we actually change the visual environment a bit and put a little bit of bespoke art in and a bit of artist and resident work? And what happens if we do this? So each director, each person has brought a little bit more. And then Artroom came in, which Jo is now running. And we've also now got, I wouldn't say now, but in the early days, we always had a gallery which connects us with the artists. But now we've got the only bespoke gallery, which creates a space of calm and reflection within the main hospital of Aberdeen. So the question of what does it mean to me? What does arts and wellbeing mean to me? I just love the way it just has that massive impact on quality of life. It gives you confidence, that space to take risks, do something for yourself, do something that means something to yourself. It's that quality of life, as I say. So, and lockdown to me also meant that we could stop and think. Anything could be possible. Suddenly people say, you can't do it like that. I went, oh, also, how will we do it? And watching people make those changes, learn how to do it differently. I mean, Artroom is an absolute classic example, but our whole programme had to be reimagined. And we didn't feel threatened by that. And we've now become even more confident in what we can do and what we will do as we emerge and recover and start to live more with this horrible situation we've got at the moment with the COVID. But that's me.
Definitely a good example of how change is possible quickly when there is a need. Elidh.
My name's Elidh Brown. I'm the programme coordinator for Combine to Create, which is Fintern Bay Arts Culture Collective programme. So that's really exciting. it's really nice to be here. And I think arts and culture, creativity is essential for well-being. And I think the most exciting thing that it brings is those opportunities for people to really increase sense of agency through creativity, both for themselves, very much in a hands-on making way, but in how we can work with others. So that's what I'm really excited about exploring today.
I'm Kate MacKay, and I'm an artist working on Combine to Create with Finton Bay Arts. And I've been working, developing a practice of community arts and social engagement over 20 years. And I've always found it really difficult to define and understand why it feels so important, and to communicate that, and to fight for it, to advocate for having, a knitting class or a mural or a mosaic, or let's exchange poetry with people from the other side of the world. And this term well-being is like a sort of relatively new thing that's started to emerge and become, intertwined with projects that I've been doing. So preparing for this event, I thought I should actually look it up and see what it actually means and if it means what I think. And I came across the NHS have a kind of 5 steps to well-being. And it says connecting with other people, learn a new skill, do something for others, be physically active, and to be in the present moment. And then I understood. I was like, that is a brilliant way to define what we're trying to do. It's not about the knitting class necessarily or the mural, but it's these things, embedding them into your life creatively. And so that's why it's so important. I'm glad it's getting the recognition that it deserves for, these days, finally.
Those years in the coming, maybe. Gabby.
My name's Gabrielle Barnby. I am she, currently dressed dynamically in turquoise, Polish heritage, so that probably describes how I look. I'm part of the Culture Collective, which is the umbrella for Orkney and Shetland Islands within this project. I'm a writer. I have done creative writing with individuals from 8 to 80, which is quite a broad spectrum, but I'm amazed, surprised, and delighted how open the same provocations can be for both the young and the old and everywhere in between. And that speaks to me that accessing creativity and that sense of creative alertness is really a universal human right and a universal demand that needs to be satisfied. And so I'm really motivated to engender a sense of kind of positive, creative alertness, regardless of product. It's that sense of connectivity, connecting personally to your interior landscape, connecting locally, this idea of dig where you stand, to really connect with that. I think over lockdown, the binge watching of American box sets has its place, but rerouting ourselves back into our personal and local worlds is really important. And then within that, to connect nationally and again globally, but at a more authentic level. I think that's really important. So that's my vision that I go by. Thank you.
Oops.
We'll find some mics.
I know.
There you go, Claire.
Hi, I'm Clare Allison, and I work for an organisation called Orkney Blide Trust. Oh, I'm supposed to describe myself. I'm in autumnal colours, I would like to say, greens and browns. And I live in Orkney. So I work for an organisation called Orkney Blide Trust. Blide is spelt B-L-I-D-E and means happy or joyous, but it can also mean fond. So the Blide, as it's affectionately known in Orkney, is an independent charity. It's Orkney's only dedicated mental health charity for people aged 16 or over. And our aim is to promote mental well-being in Orkney through active, personalised support with a focus on recovery. When I heard Elidh talking about Googling well-being, somebody that works in the wellbeing field, what I Googled was culture, strangely. And when I did Google culture, I was invited to think about that in the context of wellbeing. There were three definitions, I suppose, that came up for me. And the first was about the culture of an organisation. And for us at Blide Trust, it's important. The culture of our organisation is very important to us. It's the staff and the members work together to create a culture of inclusion, acceptance, compassion, support, collaboration and creativity. But when I think about culture and with the big C, I suppose, in terms of how we connect with culture is through what we call a therapeutic Blide. My colleague Sheena is responsible for this part of our service. So she works alongside members to support them to develop their ideas and interest into creative projects. And that's how we became involved in the Peer Arts Centre Culture Collective programme. Strangely, there was a third definition of culture, which was about the biological definition, which you think I'm going off at a tangent here, but actually in a previous life I was a microbiologist, so it made sense to me. But when I looked at that definition through the lens of well-being, it actually meant a completely different thing. So the biological definition was to maintain conditions suitable for growth. And I thought, do you know what? If you look at that through a different lens, it has a whole different meaning. And I like to think that that sums up what we do at the Blide. So.
Thanks so much for sharing that, Claire. There's a lot of biologists in this room, I think, actually. So medics and trained in neuroscience, really. That's another geek out. I want to invite also, if you are watching either live at the moment or, of course, in catch-up, then, of course, if you've got any questions or comments, please do feed them in, and we'll be able to feed them in as the conversation develops, because I've got so many. But I will contain myself, and we're going to start on this side over here. And the first one is, what's been the key learning of your work? What's around culture and well-being in your own communities? And I guess maybe picking on, has there been something surprising? And I kind of want to start over this side, and that's with Gabby.
So I did say I had done workshops with people from 8 to 80. Well, that older side of participants really I hadn't ventured into until last spring during lockdown. And yes, it did surprise me. And it underlined, which I guess I knew in my heart, that there is no difference in creative need regardless of age. And there's no difference in the potential benefits that creativity can have according to age. You don't just run out of a need to be creative, to be reflective, to re-explore, to ignite passions, that doesn't just kind of dwindle into grey. That spark is still there. And that was really exciting for me. I learned a lot as well about being open to the many different ways of communication and the importance of persistence when something fails. So if the generator fails on E-Day and there's a whole blackout, if somebody's skybox isn't working, if the only way somebody has time to communicate is one email a week and you swap a haiku, then you do it. It's off-piste, it's something you hadn't imagined that you do, but that is the way to reach somebody, and to be open to that. I've learned a lot from that. And also lockdown, I think, has taught me a lot about the importance of feasting on memory. Feasting is a really important social activity in terms of anticipation. Anticipation builds our level of enjoyment when the event takes place. But in lockdown, all we could do was feast on memory, and being able to gently, carefully and creatively open memories in order to enjoy a feast again was something that I really learnt from and really enjoyed. So yeah, that's me.
I think your writing background is really coming through there beautifully, Gabby. Claire, how about yourself?
Well, it struck me that for each individual, they have their own ideas of what mental well-being and mental health means to them. And at the Blide, we support everyone to do that in their own individual way. But having said that, through my conversations since lockdown and since opening up at the Blide, conversations with members I've noticed some kind of recurring themes. They are the importance of feeling safe, of not being judged, of being listened to, and of relationships of trust. But two things that really struck me that really resonate for this project is also the importance of connectedness and that sense of purposefulness. And so when we looked at our project, we thought it was really important to connect with lots of different aspects of that. And I've kind of ordered that in my thinking in terms of the what, why, how, who, where, and when of the project. So in terms of what it, we were looking for a creative project to be part of. The members of the Blide wanted to reconnect and do something purposeful together. And the why was about coming out of the pandemic, and the understanding that everybody had had a similar experience of being isolated and being disconnected, that it affected their mental health. Talking about mental health became a thing that everybody did, not just people that were suffering from poor mental health. And so there was a sense of that would help us connect with COVID recovery and mental health recovery at the same time. And the how was about our members saying they were interested in projects which included things like creative writing and photography, and it was important to them to be listened to and for them to be involved in the kind of things that we did. The who was really important as well, because we are a group of I suppose technically in terms of this project, we were a target audience. Or a target group that creative practitioners could link with, but actually we approached that from the bottom up. So we became a target group who were in search of practitioners to work with us. And actually that worked really well for us. We reached out to creative practitioners in our community, and they were the people that we wanted to co-create with. And that's really how this project evolved. And then I suppose the importance of space and time became important to our members, because that sense of safety and connectedness meant that the project's taking place in our building, the place that people do feel safe, and it's going to be kind of grow and create from that safe space.
Thank you so much, Claire. That's really, I guess what I'm really hearing is around that really grassroots drive, and how do you meld that with go from the bottom up, and that again such an important principle of the collective and the work that we're doing in participation, which I think brings us really nicely to the Northeast and what you guys are doing. So the same question back to you: what has been a learning, something that surprised you, something that's changed over the lockdown? Kate, do you want to start? Oh.
Yeah, I was really inspired with you talking about feasting on memory, and I think again, like why, when you're working with all age groups and doing a creative project, you're cultivating memories and you're nurturing and nourishing that side of things. And then there's also the thing about that importance of creativity in later life, when maybe memories are going and you're losing that part of yourself, and how like tactile processes and objects and smells and being present can bring back, and reconnect you to these things. And it was during lockdown, I'd always felt really drawn to this kind of work and found it important myself. But it was speaking to a friend who was a nurse in a care home, and she was saying, although the residents were being protected from infection and that sort of side of the healthcare, she said we're actually having more deaths because people are not getting that social engagement. They used to have musicians, artists, all these people coming in, all these activities. She's like, people are just alone in their rooms and they're giving up. So it was finding a way, and how profound it is, just small actions, having art processes that could be remote, or maybe make something out in the landscape with a group of people, and then it goes there and it's something that people could touch, and but just that it isn't just well-being in the sense of just feeling happy and comfortable. It's actually a life source, and it's a reason to live. So yeah, that's why it came up for me.
That builds on beautifully. Elidh?
Yeah, I think certainly through the pandemic, just the fact that, at the outset, that so many people in community organisations got active so quickly and had to think differently and had to think quite creatively about, in the first instance, quite immediate needs. So immediate wellbeing needs, like, do people have enough food? If they're completely isolated and formal services have not established, they've simply dropped away. So that showed this burst of creativity from community, from a place of community. So I think that came throughout the pandemic with different organisations, including arts organisations, including Fintorn Bay Arts as well, finding different ways to reach and connect people through creativity, which was absolutely, as you said, Kate, vital for their actual health and well-being, to prevent that sort of an overwhelming sense of disconnection and isolation. But at the point of then this project coming into being, when I saw the press release that said Combine to Create had got funding, I had nothing to do with this project, but I read it and went, oh, this is what we need for the future. And so for me, and that was a really exciting moment for me to think that these are the seeds that have been sown through this now going forward. And I was very lucky that, totally unbeknownst to me, the director was already having conversations with the organisation I worked with. But it must have been meant to be, because I did think this, I do think this is a really important part of how we create and continue to recreate in a new way well-being going forward.
Fantastic, yeah. And then we go to, I'd be really interested to hear a bit more about Artrooms and Jo and the work you've been doing over the pandemic.
So I suppose a little bit of context about what Artroom is before I start talking about it. So we use artists to go and work with patients in wards, day units, and places like specialist rehab and palliative care. And then obviously when lockdown hit, all of those spaces were closed. So how do you reach the unreachable? And so there was a lot of kind of work we did online. We had bespoke and kind of generalised art packs that went into different wards, because of course depending on the space that you're working in, it would have rules about what kind of materials you could have, but we were also acutely aware of not putting extra pressure onto the staff as well. In a kind of usual situation pre-COVID, the staff were delighted and they really wanted to help, but we really, really didn't want to put extra pressure on the staff. So it was basically learn, adapt, learn, adapt, learn, adapt, and having to look at the bigger picture as well. A lot of the medical staff weren't able to help us in the manner that they used to be. And so that kind of, in a way, sort of pushed us outwards. And we were building contacts with people that we didn't have contact with before, like CPNs who were out in the community and some of the kind of rural community hospitals. And so we would be distributing art packs and getting people contact that way. Or we also got a donation of iPads where the artists could set up Artroom online, and we were delivering in the wards through their visiting iPads as well, or their own devices if it was one-to-one sessions rather than a group session. Then that worked really well. But then we were also acutely aware of the people that we were missing who don't have that digital connection. And it was brilliant because there was all this amazing stuff going on online, but not everybody's got access. And so we ended up partnering with an organisation called Healthy Minds to get face-to-face sessions. And that was primarily working with people who would have been attending occupational therapists and day units, which had all closed during the pandemic. So those people are the ones that really, really needed support and help the most, and they just weren't getting it because the places that they would have been to before were closed to them. So we ran blocks of sessions in a community space, an old bowling green that had been taken over by the local community and made into a community interest company. And we had sessions there which were outdoors, and we're hoping to continue those sessions as well. So that's been brilliant. And we just had a little exhibition of work, which is on at the Belmont Film House this week, which is great as well, because then you get to see the stuff that people made, and it's kind of bringing people together. And so, yeah, I mean, we've always kind of been in a world where we're bound by restrictions and red tape, and, so our kind of creative heads weren't too phased by, because when you work in a hospital setting, you work around the most mad boundaries, and then our job is to figure, how do we get around this? How do we do all these amazing things? So it's the lockdown has been an extension of that, but it's also transformed the way the project runs, because we're now starting to develop a referral system. We're involving not just the SCNs and, the auxiliaries and the people on the ward, but we're involving, psychiatrists and psychologists and, other staff and pushing out into the wider community as well, which is a really interesting direction to be taken.
That's amazing, Jo. I mean, there's so much there. I'm seeing a lot of nodding, and we've got a little bit of time. So actually, I'm going to ask a few. I'm going to build on some of those points a little bit more, and ask anyone else to join in as well. Because what I'm really hearing, and what we've seen play out in our own work, and with a lot of the communities we're supporting, is that there is a tension. We want to reach people who are easy to ignore. Very difficult to get hold of because they're not linked in with services. But then also appreciating the capacity and limit. And then another program is thinking about how agile organisations are. And so one of our projects on the Western Isles, which is a slightly different collective, but that's okay, we'll bring them in, is around, the role of libraries, Lachila and Together, to connect, digitally connect people. But what we found through those discussions was that, especially in rural parts, and I'll be interested to hear other people's perspective, it was really the small organisations that could, because they were agile, to use a technical term, they could make new partnerships very quickly. They could redistribute the resources in a way that bigger organisations really struggle to do. And I'd be really interested to kind of pick on that a little bit more and see if I'd be interested, what are those hot tips after working from with hospitals and navigating hospitals and that approach. Do you have any thoughts on that? Does that resound with your experience? I kind of want to open it up, but anyone want to come in on that?
I think it definitely resounds with me, and what you were saying about it's like creativity finds a way, it adapts, it innovates, and that's the nature of it. And so any context, any situation, lockdowns, hospitals, it's like it's an amazing creative challenge, and incredible things with the right people will come out. So that's really inspiring to hear.
Jo, Sally.
One of the things I was looking at, as Jo was speaking, the thing that resonated with me when she said there are people out there who are not getting access due to the virtual, and I think that is part of the recovery process of the next steps. Is how do it's been shown through studies that there are people who were already marginalised, and the COVID situation has marginalised them even further. They're organised. All of us will have stories of people we used to work with who have disappeared into the hinterland somewhere. And it's how do we now develop our services which make sure that we can start to address those inequalities. There were inequalities to begin with, and there now are even. I think those are more entrenched in certain sectors of our communities. And how do we as culture collectives support those thinkings? So they are governmental thinkings, they are institutional thinkings, but as you said, it's the people on the ground who have that agility to know where those people, not so much people, where those groups are. Where are those young people who used to come to sessions who now have, for want of a better word, become invisible?
Yeah.
What has happened to the invisible become even more invisible? We have a thing in, what was your thing? The reaching the unreachable. Yeah. That's our next mantra, is how do we reach the unreachable? And that's how do GAT now start looking at those elements of our services and reach those unreachable. We've done quite a lot during COVID, during lockdown. There's a lot more to be done.
Yeah, there's that classic hard to reach, easy to ignore, and even more so now. Elidh.
Yeah, I suppose I think as much as the pandemic has exacerbated inequalities, because people have been so determined and because it has been people on the ground in communities, and that upsurge of informal volunteering, which there are challenges within that, but it also is brilliant because, when push comes to shove, people have totally shown compassion and a willingness to help and a want to help. And although maybe some of that is dissipated now, I suppose there's that, and also I suppose what I'm aware of in Moray is that it's made things more visible, like it's made poverty more visible. So actually for creative practitioners stepping up who have the courage to step forward now and be part of trying to work in a different way and work with people who are harder to hear or harder to reach or perceived to be, your champions are there and want to be found and identified to help us get in there and do that work. So I think I think that means there's an exciting opportunity, and I suppose that's where there is unawareness. It has made some of the gaps in the people who do fall through the cracks, and where this needs to reach. It has sort of highlighted that, but it's going to take some alliances and working in different ways with people we haven't done before, and absolutely working with small community groups and organisations, and the people who want to work with us. So it might be unlikely alliances are really important.
Thanks so much, Elidh. I'm just checking my laptop here. I'm trying not to read about it, but we've got some comments coming in as well from Angela. It's lovely to hear you all. Creativity is the joy of life, intrinsic to being human, the most natural thing. Lovely that it's now formally recognised that creativity is a necessity for well-being, especially post-COVID, and great to hear all your experiences. So thanks for sharing that. It's a lovely comment there. And again, please feel free to keep sharing as we go along. I don't know, I kind of want to push one bit further, if that's all right, because then there's this interesting tension there around the grassroots rising up. What next? I feel like there's this really interesting period as things come to the next phase. How do we make sure that there are groups that actually it has been more inclusive for, disabled people have been asking for flexible working and distance and remote rural communities for a very long time. And then as soon as that is affected the mainstream, then all of a sudden it happens. So there are some hard-won gains, but also I'm really interested in what next for the grassroots, the creative practitioners who have risen up, volunteered in their communities. How do we then formalise that in a way that doesn't put the pressure on them longer term, but, they're working with bigger organisations. This isn't a big society like, pick up, let's reduce statutory services. Don't know if that's too political. I don't know. But, I just want to push a bit more. I'm just really, what do you think? How's that playing out in your different spaces? Gabby?
My experience, as I mentioned before, is that determination to use all the various forms of communication that are possible when a face-to-face interaction was not possible did teach me a lot. And I forgot to mention, and I feel remiss, is I'm not just talking about my perseverance. I'm talking about the perseverance of my participants. 85-year-old plus participant on a very small Orcadian island who's never used Zoom before in her life, repeatedly trying to get online, having multiple phone calls going on again, using capture to spot the hydrant so she can get through the security so she can join the creative session. We're talking hours of work for somebody who is not finding this easy, who cannot have somebody else in the house to help her. So I'm talking about also the perseverance of individuals who want to participate. And I think that speaks to this universality of creativity being a fundamental human right as well. So that perseverance from the participant point of view, I think, is there. And that speaks to the kind of grassroots involvement and how that can grow. And one of the really difficult things for me was this funding and this project finishing, which was funded by the St Magnus International Festival. Fantastic. Lovely sessions, produced a lovely booklet. There's an online ebook if you wish to find it. And then it stopped. And these lovely individuals I've been meeting, over 2 to 3 months, it's gone. It's not there for them to look forward to. It's not there for me to learn from. And it's a void that reappears. And it's a void that feels more of a void because we had only just learnt how to fill it. And I don't really know where to go from there apart from substantial, regular, long-term funding.
Sally, hand straight up there at that point.
It's what you're saying is very dear to my heart, because one thing we haven't had a shout out is that we're actually from the North East Culture Collective. That Joe and I are part of something called the North East Culture Collective, which again is part of something called Culture Aberdeen. So we have this sort of. We are working together to try and create something different in this area. However, what I wanted to look at is the fact that through the pandemic, the NHS and the HSPCs have recognised the need for wellbeing and social prescribing and all those sorts of things. And all of us are aware of when a big, massive organisation looks at this, the first thing they've got to look at is their statutory requirements, which is deliver medical care, deliver clinical care. And to be honest, we have to accept that fact. Drugs, equipment, machinery, that's what we need as a physical. But they are also very aware of the other side of the holistic well-being model. One goes so far, but then it all needs to come together. And the model often at the moment is they get that far and then it's let's create some wellbeing coordinators and then let's signpost to the third sector. Who's paying for the third sector? And that is the conversation I think we need to start having. How do we collaborate across the different, because they seem to be apart at the moment and together. They want each other but don't know how, they haven't got a shared language. Is how do you get that shared language of between clinical and medical well-being and health and well-being and culture and social prescribing with sport, with running, with the whole thing. I think of culture together and we are part of that matrix. So to me, it's about having those conversations at grassroots, having those conversations with the institutions, and an organisation such as ours who has this long-term relationship, how do I now talk to the Director of Public Health to say, this is what I think we can do, could you buy into it? Or the other thing is, which is what I think we're trying to do at the moment, gather that evidence of need from the grassroots so that they have the language to go back to the people with the bean counters and say, in actual fact, that does make sense. It makes as much sense. So how do we get the social prescribing in the GP practice in the local hospitals? It has to be from the communities. It will not be sustainable unless those grassroots communities are involved in the development of those services and in the sustainability of those services, and it has to be paid for as part of the service, not just something that the third sector go, we enjoy doing this, so we're going to let you come and play. Yeah. It's about the fact that it is something which is an innate need within every single community, and how do we take that forward, sustainability, into the future? It's my soapbox.
What a delightful soapbox. Claire?
It occurred to me, as somebody that works in that third sector in a mental health and wellbeing setting, I think for me, a note of optimism is if this is the time to capture that.
Absolutely.
Our members talked to us about that sense that other people walked in their shoes during the pandemic. So they knew what social isolation felt like. Mm-hmm. They knew what anxiety felt like. Yeah. And if we don't capture that sense now where it's still fresh in people's memories to say as you're moving on, as COVID recovery and mental health recovery and people going back to whatever normal is moves on, then let's not forget that what that felt like and the importance that we all held for finding creative ways of doing things and focusing on well-being and talking about mental health in the same way as we talked about physical health. So if there's ever a time to capture that, I think now is the time to do that. So.
Yeah, definitely. I think and what really struck me as well is that, this is the moment. I think there's a worry that as things return to normal, there's a quick amnesia. It's like quickly get back. And I think we really need to pause on that point, as you say. And there's something about the structural funding that I'm really interested in as well. One small part of that, we've been trying to connect communities with researchers. And again, that shared language about how do we build that evidence in a way that respects lived and learned expertise, but really importantly, it's not researchers doing on to a community, not extracting from a community, but bringing that voice in. But it's been interesting to see how those power dynamics play out, and and some of those organisations are cultural organisations, some of third sector organisations with the Ideas Fund across Highlands Islands, many of which are in the Culture Collective. So I'm really excited to see what happens next in terms of these conversations happening in Culture Collective, these conversations happening in the funding schemes. I've chatted to Elidh about that. Do you want to step in at this point?
Yeah, I think I think this is such a great opportunity, so to not fall asleep, and also perhaps as well to be able to say, culture and creativity, very much part of the third sector. These grassroots community groups, these tiny groups, bigger groups, community organisations, they're part of the third sector. They can't also all go out of the same pot. They need to be well invested in. We need to build on this learning. So I suppose an opportunity for some of the organisations that we might be working with through Combine to Create might be the Community Health and Wellbeing Fund that should be opening across every area of Scotland, that the TSIs will be, that are responsible as the lead partner for distributing. But that's not the funding that will sustain creativity and culture, and that is really important. And I suppose that part of the message back both to, both to the regional health boards and to local IJBs and to the Scottish Government is to try to not let all this happen in silos and let us have these conversations together and bring them back up. So sorry, I hope you don't mind, but I just these are, it sort of sounds complicated, doesn't it? But we need those community organisations to be able to get funding, for example, through that fund, to feel they're able to lead and to work with us in partnership in a mutual and supportive way. We need to be able to feel as a third sector we can work in partnership with IGBs and health boards in a mutual and supportive way. And as individuals, we need to be able to work with each other that way too. And that's what I'd like to happen.
That's your soapbox.
There we go.
And honestly, Eileen, I know you from your previous role in terms of, and if you don't know what a TSI is, a third sector interface, I can only recommend them very highly in terms of being connecting. And so just to explain that a wee bit. We'll go back on track, of course. Oh, in fact, maybe you're not on track. We've got some questions. Or at least a comment. I'll just read it whilst we're going through. So from Amy, thank you for joining. Hi, fascinating conversation, thank you all. I was wondering how you would suggest creative practitioners, artists could become involved in working with community and wellbeing. Should the artists keep an eye out for opportunities put forward by organisations, or should they approach possible partners themselves? Any takers? It kind of feeds into our next question, but I don't know if we want an immediate response, or would you want to go to the next question?
Well, that's the chicken and the egg question.
Yes. Okay.
I can answer that because, my other hat is I do poetry and writing, so I can kind of look at things from a management perspective and the organisation's perspective, but also as a practicing artist. How much admin do you want to do? It's basically the answer to that question. Starting your own project, you've got to find the funding. You've got to get partners. That's kind of expected for any kind of creative project. So having the buy-in of an organisation gives you support with that, and maybe a little bit of help. But I suppose it's up to yourself as an artist how much of that you want to take on and how much time you've got, because a lot of us do have day jobs. We work in the kind of creative sector and admin and management and all those other things, and then the other bit of our time we kind of try and cram in some creative practice at 3 a.m. writing poetry. But yeah, it's difficult. I think it needs to be a combination of both. And sometimes there's always that leading, you kind of have to go where the funding is, which is really annoying because there's maybe something that you really want to do, and then you've got to find the appropriate funding stream. But I think that is starting to change a little bit. There have been quite a few things. I've been to conversations and things that have gone, online, and funders are attending it. And they're getting a real close, magnified view of what it is like for the boots on the ground people that are running things, and they see how their processes are making things really difficult. Yeah, we've got all this amazing money for the project, but we don't have money to pay people to deliver it, because core funding is one of the most difficult things to get. We've got tons of materials money. Materials money is never a problem in Artroom, but actually paying the artists to be there, you can't have it without them, and so there's all these kind of barriers and challenges that you've got to overcome. But yeah, as an individual artist, I think it can be quite difficult, because if you take on that project, you're taking on all of it. You're the artist and the project manager and the admin person and payroll and finance, and yeah, you need to have a lot of time to be able to do that.
And we'll go, Sally, did you want to feed in? Or?
I was just going to say that if, as an individual, if you want to work in this sector, there are safeguarding issues and such like. So working with an organisation would always be a sort of preferable route in my thinking, because safeguarding is a big thing when you're working, because part of wellbeing is you're often working with people who are vulnerable. So it doesn't preclude it, but it just supports yourself and your participants if you work with an organisation that has a very strong understanding of safeguarding and consent and all the thing of working with participants.
Yeah, I think that's maybe my critical friend answers to that question would also agree with that. I think there's a certain degree also, because it takes so much capacity. If you're taking this on, you want to put it where there's a bit of strategic support, there's safeguarding support, you know, that you're working in a way that is informed by previous experience, and very often it's the third sector people on the ground who will have that relationship with communities. And we've seen it play out a little bit with some of the work we've been doing with New Scots, for example, where there's a lot of goodwill. People want to do things, but there's very little coordination, very little informed by the New Scots themselves, for example. And so actually it's about sometimes taking a step back and saying, what else is going on that I can support? If you want to do it, I mean, there's absolutely, you know, the intention is great, but I think it's about being strategic with that and making sure because the worst sort of thing is if you start, you build a relationship, and then you stop because you can't find funding, or you know, your capacity changes. And again, it's that risk, isn't it, over here about like starting something you've developed, you know where the gap is, and then you stop it, and that can be, you know, traumatizing actually. And if you take a trauma-informed approach, that is difficult. That's really difficult. And so yes.
Yeah,
Kate.
I was going to say definitely collaborate, and that's like the key, and play your strengths, and you know, so. And then if you can get a good relationship with like a certain school or a hospital or something like this, you can go in and you can support what they're doing. So you're, you know, like the nurses and the medical staff are burnt out, teachers are burnt out, you know, they've got too much to do. They'd love to have a garden or a mural or whatever. And then you can sort of fit in, and then what's amazing is how much you can learn from them, you know, and they can sort of show you this is how, you know, like different service users, and you know, and that's the mutually beneficial way. But yeah, if you're trying to do all the different, if you're trying to be a manager, it saps out all your creativity. You turn up and you're feeling not inspired, you know. So I think collaboration.
Thanks so much. Well, that does lead us to our kind of next question, and of course we'll take more questions as we come along. But yeah, it was actually what provocations or reflections might you have to share with others who want to do more of this work, and perhaps also for the sector in terms of, you know, almost like, and we've picked up a little bit on this in terms of what next and that previous question, but I kind of would like that thought, and we'll start again with Grampian Hospital's Art Trust.
We're part of the NECC, which is the North East Cultural Collective, which is probably a bit easier. I think I've already mentioned my soapbox, but I think it's about that collaborative approach. It's about getting investment from all different partners. It's interesting that last question about the artist saying, how do I get involved? There are grassroots, and to me, that's how an artist would be best. As you said, would be best to get involved, so that they can have that training. They can have the risks, the different risks that come from working with the public. They can be supported in that, so they can get on with what they do, which is being an artist and being a cultural leader. But it's about how do we collaborate going forward. So I think my provocation is just literally, not provocation, my thing for the future is how do we collaborate across all the different areas, and every single community is different. It has different members in it, so one size doesn't fit all. So it's that recognition that if we do, say, for want of a better word, if we do create social prescribing in Stonehaven, that will be a different model than we create in Inverurie, or a different model than we create in the neighbourhoods of Aberdeen. But it's got different people, it's got different interests, and it's how do you create those lovely I love that expression, grassroots, but how do you create those individual responses and invest in communities so that they can be the people that actually take it forward. And then we take the third sectors who then support that and keep it going. And that's where the investment to me has to be, in those third sector organisations. I know it's because we are a third sector organisation. That does help. And we struggle like everybody else to get core funding to pay for the managers and pay for that. But without them, it doesn't work. In my sense, I mean, yes, you can have, and I think your example of something you started and took forward, and then it fizzles out. And that's what happens if you just continually fund projects.
Yeah.
A project, the definition of a project, it's a time-bound event. If we keep doing this by project, followed by project, you have to relearn every time. Let's try looking at what is a sustainable future. That's my provocation. How do we create a sustainable future invested in by third sector and institutions and the government going forward? It's a big provocation. Yeah. But is it possible?
So, social justice won't be done by projects.
No.
It won't be done by projects.
We sit here.
No,
dreamers.
But no, absolutely. I think it's a really powerful provocation. Thank you. We'll go over to the islands, the Creighton Island.
Yeah, so just chiming in there, I think this is about being sustainable, and particularly thinking about being sustainable for creatives as well, and for those who are new to doing work on wellbeing, new to working with vulnerable groups rather than bright, shiny, young, healthy things. That people. That this is skilled work. It is personal work. It is creative work, and the creatives doing it, in my opinion, need support in a really specific way through peer mentoring, through somebody that they can be debriefed with, that they can be supported for, and that if the model of projects is going to continue, as is likely, then they need to build in creative practitioner support time. You get within your practitioner's 8-hour day, you get an hour or 2 hours where you have a debrief with your kind of senior project manager. And that is built into your funding. And I know this is being done in places such as the Hampshire Cultural Trust, where on top of the artist's 8-hour pay, they get another hour that they can spend with their senior manager to debrief, because they're working with vulnerable youngsters. And for an artist who's never done that before, there's a lot that can come out. And I think that's a really serious thing that needs to be taken forward. That was number one. Don't worry, there's only a second. The second is we have learnt a lot about doing things online, about increasing access. Fantastic. And then there's a gap now, and doing things like we are today, which is both online and in the room. We need people like Mario, sitting very quietly at the back, our technical support, who understands microphones, cameras, audio quality, the BSL signers. Thank you. Sorry for speaking too fast. There is a skills gap, and also a gap in things being built into budgets to enable the amazing innovations that have been made in access to continue. On Orkney, we're doing something for Fair Saturday, a FOI. Last year, we did it totally online. This year, we're doing it totally face-to-face, because we do not have the technology, the volunteers, the funding. It's a small community thing. So immediately we cut off at the knees all the people we managed to reach last year. But we're joyous, we're celebratory, we're meeting together face to face. But we are losing something as well. So this is something else which needs to be embedded. This peer supporting, this technological increase in access in a really kind of long-term way.
I feel like hybrid's been talked about a lot, and blended approaches, but it doesn't happen by magic, as you say. That is, and it takes a lot of work, as the people in the room will know. Very much so. Claire?
I suppose for me, it kind of naturally follows on from all the other conversations we've had, is that the project that I'm involved in on behalf of the Blide Trust is one of those projects that did come from grassroots. For us, well, I suppose I'll tell a little bit of the story about how we got involved in the Culture Collective. Was a group of people at the Blide Trust, people with lived experience of mental health, wanted to do a project, something to bring us out of the COVID lockdown, and something that we could take part in and connect with each other again. So we'd already had that idea, and that my job was to look for the funding for it. That's the usual. So I was searching around looking for funding, and I came across the Culture Collective, and I had a brief look at it, and I thought, oh, it's a call out for artists, though. That's not us, really. So I'd put it to one side, carried on looking, and then one of our members sent it to me again, an email to say, have you seen this? So I looked at it again, and the second time I looked at it, I thought, actually, it's a call out for artists, but when you keep on reading, it's about, as I said, a target group, a group of people who are going to co-create with artists. So, and I was really fortunate to be able to connect with people like Maya and Carol at the Peer Arts Centre, who were able to say, actually, it meets the same aims, so you don't have to start from the same point. And so we put something in as an organisation. As I said, we started kind of from the other way around. So a third sector organisation working in the field of wellbeing and mental health, connecting with local artists and achieving the same goal. So that ability for them to be able to say it, to look creatively at our project. But it also enabled us for two of the people that are delivering, who are creative practitioners, are also members of the Blide Trust. One of them was the one that sent the email to us. So it actually enabled to reach out to practitioners, but also to look at our own members and to recognise that they had lots of skills that they could bring to this project too. So of the 5 creative practitioners, 2 of them are actually members of the Blide, who are bringing their own expertise to share. So. And what I suppose the other thing to say about what we proposed is, from experience of working and doing projects, collaborative art projects in the past, what we had learned was that it was useful to have an extra role that we kind of built in. We called it, we had to find a name for it, so we called it a creative link practitioner. But I suppose in some ways that person is the person who organises the therapeutic Blide part of what we do and has relationships with all of our members, and it's resonating with what Gabby was saying about they have the relationships and can support both the members of the Blide, but also the creative practitioners in kind of holding the project together, in helping a conduit for communication and exchange of ideas. And so we kind of built that into our project, knowing that from experience that's what really helped the project grow and develop. It allowed us to come up with themes, shared themes, and genuinely co-create right from the beginning. But it also gave us a sense that we could be quite fluid and flexible, and didn't have to be too prescriptive, because we had that extra role built in to kind of enable the whole process. So. For us, that feels like a really positive model. And so my last thought, I suppose, was in the future, perhaps I might not have looked again. I might have thought that's for creative practitioners, it's not for us. So maybe right from the beginning to kind of advertise it as a co-created project, to say we're looking for co-creators to work together. Mm-hmm. And right from the outset, that's your starting point. And then the question about, does it come from the creative practitioner or come from the organisation? It is both, because that encourages it right from the very beginning to be that co-creation, collaboration right from the start. So those are my thoughts.
I'm going to clap at everyone, so thank you so much, Claire. We're going to come to you very, very shortly, but I just want to bring in some comments. So we have one from Angela again. So the arts have always been at the forefront of understanding and creating change. It's tricky as projects are mostly given short-term funding, no long-term development to allow trust to build true community development, which would better enable long-term community ownership. And it's hard to look for funding and get your project to fit. So I think that really resounds with some of the chats we've been discussing. And then another comment from Mary. So I would like to say that creative practitioners need time built in to pursue their own practice, so they don't become art therapists rather than the artists who engage with people. So I'm hearing from that kind of tension around some people want to be, engaged, socially engaged, community artists, applied artists, but also just the intrinsic value of developing your art form as well, and the space for all of those things within culture and arts and wellbeing, I would say. So then that comes to the big question for you guys. So what provocation, what reflection? Kate, are you kicking us off?
Yeah, just following on from that, that was along the lines of what I was thinking about, how you've got to practice what you preach, and if you're looking after other people's well-being, you have to be looking after your own well-being. You have to know that you're going to be able to pay your rent and that you're not going to have to battle to get paid, and there's nothing more devastating than you put your heart and soul into a funding application and it comes back, and trying to do accounts, when you've never been taught, but yeah, to expect us to be able to do that and, to be able to pursue your own practice, to be able to learn have time to nourish your well-being and your practice, in order to be able to do it for others. And also the other thing that I think is really important in talking about, working in healthcare and the social prescribing is a kind of early intervention approach, because often, I found, if I've put things out there and said, please refer people, they've been like, great, because this person's tried everything else, and we don't know what else to do with them, so on you go. And you sort of think, it'd be better to value it before they've had to go through that process, to avoid, ever having to go, down the medical route or into hospital, if they could just, have that creative well-being. And it's just so wonderful to be part of an emerging collective, and all these different people with different skills, like you're saying, the technical skills, and to hear that all our different experiences from different places, we're all totally on the same page, and we're having, we're fighting for the same things. And so, yeah, it's really wonderful.
Thanks. Elidh.
Yeah, I think just the provocation for the future is we totally can do this, and it's probably feels sometimes pressure. We must suddenly all be engaging in lots of things that we are new to or not heard about before, as well as what we know. I suppose it's how we continue. We don't need to know everything. We can really start really building this trust with different kinds of groups and organisations, the skills that they can bring to the process. And I think, I hope, like, through our project with bringing the Clare practitioners together and being able to, both at a local level and a national level, having these mutually supportive spaces and just being open to us open together to creating something that might feel unfamiliar to all of us is a little bit scary, but a little bit exciting as well. And I hope, therefore, that we can think creatively about the funding and more participatory funding processes that brings together different stakeholders from different sorts of themes, and allowing, dare I say it, even sort of participatory budgeting approaches that might come into the future. But I really apologise because I managed not to say it right till then.
No, but
I think there is something there about recognising that is also where creativity is required for us to make the most of this and make the most of everyone's skills and strengths.
Absolutely. Being on the other side of that, just seeing what does participatory funding mean, how you apply the same principles, and you have creative funds that are sadly not very creatively managed, or in terms of how you not managed, but more in terms of how you, as you say, who you're pitching for, who's welcome to those funds. And I'm really hearing this. It takes a village, and Scotland is we are a village. All the different skills, bring it all together. Sally, sorry, you want to come in?
As it's what you're saying about values, I am trying to look at how we can create a sort of different types of social prescribing. I don't know whether I'll ever get there, but I'm looking at a model. And one of the conversations I had was with the University of Aberdeen economic health bunch researchers. And I know that's health economics, right? I know that sounds a bizarre place to go, but that for us is how do we gather that evidence needs? How do we prove our value? And what was the first thing she said is, one word, gather. If we look at how we evaluate a project and how we work with you, we need to look at how we value things. And the first thing she said was, let's not do it using monetary values. Let's see how we can make that conversation with the participants and things, and we might put a monetary stamp on it to give us a way of that, just one sort of measurement. But she also talked about the sort of values and the evaluation that we've been doing a lot is about the value to people, the added value, the outcomes, and that is far more important. And how we can do that. So it's again about creating that language, that shared language. And there is some in health economics, and there is some research being done. And it's how do we actually link in with that to do that creative funding, and to make sure that our projects speak to more than just one area. Is how do we spread that value base? How do we spread that conversation out? So it means things to more than just the creative sector or cultural sector.
Brilliant. I'm so excited. We can do this. We absolutely can. So I think we're slowly start rounding up a little bit, and what I'm going to invite is we're going to go through each of the our wonderful speakers. This is your chance to get a question in, or if you're watching from the past, you can still throw one in. Who knows? Maybe we'll answer. We'll be able to pick up. We'll share contacts. So I'm going to ask everyone to kind of, if you've got a sentence or two, just what you're taking away from this conversation. We'll start with Claire. We'll just go down the line, I think. And also, if you want to quickly just tell us how we can find out more about your work as a collective or as part of the organisations you work with. So Claire.
Okay. For me, I suppose I've, as I said already, come from the opposite perspective in terms of being an organisation that we're looking for creative practitioners. But I think it sounds like there are lots of creative practitioners out there looking for organisations. So really, with that behind us, we should be able to make this work, shouldn't we? Is my take-home thing. If you want to find out more about the work of Orkney Blide Trust, we do have a website, and all of the activities to do with our Culture Collective project, which is called The Map Is Not the Territory. You can find out all about it on our website.
So I think a metaphor is useful here. I'm a writer. Imagine your creativity, one's creativity is like a huge body of water at the top of a mountain that has a dam built in front of it. And it just needs somebody with persistence to open a sluice gate to let that water flood out. And it might take persistence for somebody to get up there to that sluice gate and open it for you. And you may have to wait a long time, but it is worth doing. And if you can imagine everybody's creativity in all these bodies of water high up in the hills waiting to be released, I believe that that's where creativity lives. And all these stories simply are waiting to be told. And the creativity is waiting to be released. And that is the motivation for all ages, all capacities, access for all. But it might take somebody a long time to get up that mountain path to reach somebody to let that water flow. And that's, I guess that's a really good journey to take. And information, I'm working with Age Scotland Orkney, and you can look up GabrielleBarnby.com for About Me, and more information about our project will be with the Culture Collective as well. But yes, let's open those dams, get that energy flowing.
Let's sluice, maybe?
Yeah.
Let's sluice. All right, thank you so much, Gabby. Just quickly, we had one comment come in from James. It was great for me to read A Restless Art for those doing creative participatory community building, just thinking about books and resources. Across boundaries often do not identify as artists, and that's by Francois Matarazzo, who I know is also part of the Culture Collective and a great friend of some of the Fun Palaces too. So, Kate.
Yeah, I'm totally inspired by everything everyone's been saying, and I like this tension between the 2 points of there being this feeling very supported with a national collective and communities and sectors and practices that are very different, and from my own experience, and working together to play our strengths. And then also this opposite thing of embedding it into your local community and sort of being able to work, very, very locally, hands-on with what you know and who you know. And so have the two things together, I think, it's very strong, powerful.
Thanks so much.
Oh, and my own website is Emanate Art, and then MurrayPolaris.com is some of the work that I've been doing through lockdown to get people to interact with residents in care homes.
Wonderful. Hayley.
Yeah, I think there's just really a strong sort of sense of a collective shared purpose for this next period going forward. So I come away with that really strong sense of opportunity for us to make the most of this programme and what it can do to help build a better future. And I don't think we need to wait for revolutions anymore, because health and social care, for example, is really struggling and stuck. creativity and wellbeing has so much to offer at every part of that, right from early intervention, prevention, right through to a crisis point. Actually, that's now, the pandemic has, sadly helped to prove that. So hopefully we can perhaps be trusted to bring in more creative approaches to some of the more intractable problems without it being the kind of, community and arts can just catch that and not be valued. So actually come in as an equal partner with more partners. So I'm looking forward to that. And if you want to find out more about Findhornby Arts and Combine to Create, which is the number of long-term residencies, and Kate's one of the artists on that programme, then visit Findhornby Arts website, and that's also where there's opportunities. So there will be some open call opportunities. I'm sure that's the same with other programmes as well. So please check us out on our website.
Fantastic. Sally?
I think I take away the sense that now is the time. We are in sharp focus from COVID, as you say, unfortunately, because of the pandemic, when people have really recognised what is important to life. Obviously, health is important to life, and well-being and our own personal soul is very much part of that. So I think now is the time. Now is the time to remove ourselves from the sticking plaster role, sticking plaster over the bits that don't work. It's actually being the thing that does work. We know it works. And how do we make sure that we continue it? And I thought it was interesting what you said, Lewis, earlier on, when you said that, it could all fizzle away. We just need to keep that engine going. And there are funders who before didn't think about well-being. And I think we need to push them to recognise the fact that the work that artists do in well-being is important. It's not a sideline. It's not an also-ran. It is a really key part of culture.
So much, Sally.
Just to kind of follow on from what Sally said as well, it's a really exciting time, and, kind of whole pandemic has highlighted we don't need to justify the value of culture anymore. We don't need to justify the value of supporting each other anymore. The pandemic has kind of highlighted good things and bad things, and it's like, the fact that funders are starting to sit up and take notice is really exciting. I don't think there's many people that want to go back to the way it was. I don't want to say the dreaded moving forward, but like these kind of buzzwords and catchphrases that come out of different sectors. But the fact that the people that can help us achieve those solutions are starting to sit up and take notice and also alter the way that they're working. I think that's really, really exciting to be part of, and gives us hope, I suppose, for the future.
Thank you so much, Jo. And how can people get in touch with
And so we through our website and social media, we are GAT Art, and there's a beautiful digital version of our Artroom book that we made. So if you want to know a bit more about the project, I think it's always easier for us to show people what we do than tell them. Nobody wants to be talked at, and it's a whole load of patient artwork and writing and poetry, and it's beautiful. I'm very proud of it, and I helped put it together. But I'm kind of biased, but it just kind of shows what Artroom is and what it does for people. So you can go in and have a look at that.
Fantastic. Well, we'll slowly start drawing to a close, and of course all this information will also be on the Culture Collective website, all the opportunities, but it's great to hear, and it's just been really inspiring. And if I'm allowed to have a reflection myself and listen to everybody, we talk a lot, it's COP, obviously that was a big theme, and there's this phrase that always, there's no climate justice without racial justice, without social justice. These are, they're integral, they're intersectional problems, they're not separate things. For me, what I'm really hearing, and I've never really thought about it in this way before, is, the pandemic has really shown that there is no culture without health and well-being, and there's no health and well-being without culture. And I think there's kind of a paired thought there, like actually a separation, and actually I think that more embeddedness is going to be so important. I feel really privileged to be part of this conversation. I'm really excited. Of course, if anyone wants to follow up with some of the work that we do as well with Science Kaylee, we've got our Ideas Fund for those in the Highlands and Islands. We support the Culture and Wellbeing Community Network Scotland, which is an informal group bringing people on the grassroots practitioners to share practice. Big friends of Culture Collective, of course. And if for any choirs, we have our mental health resources and our school resources as well. And I think that leaves us to kind of thank the people in the room. So Morven, Catherine, the Culture Collective, Mado at the tech, and of course our guests for joining us and listening in. Morven's going to do that job, so we're going to pass over. And I want to say a massive thank you on behalf of people online, people watching, to our guests for coming through and for this really special conversation. Thank you so much.